Bio. We're going to finish up Chapter 5 today, and we've been talking about populations of organisms and how their populations grow. So now we're going to look at one specific group of organisms, the humans, and how their population grows. So our first thing we're going to take a look at is how has the size of the human population changed over time. So what has happened to the human population in the course of history? So, similar to the other communities of living organisms or populations of living organisms, the size of the human population tends to increase with time. And for most of the human existence, the population grew very slowly because there were several limiting factors that kept population sizes low. So things like poor sanitation, not a lot of technology, didn't really know much about medicine. So those types of factors will keep population sizes very low, and then a lot of childbirth, a lot of death happened in that department a long time ago, so that kept our population sizes low. However, around 500 years ago, the human population began growing much more rapidly, and this was caused by the fact that life was made easier and safer by advances in agriculture and advances in industry. And then death rates were dramatically reduced due to improved sanitation, which just mentioned earlier, medicine, which was mentioned earlier, and healthcare, and while the birth rates remained high. Again, I mentioned all of those as things that 100 years ago, or I guess around 500 years ago, that these were really just kind of difficult things to deal with, even as much as earlier on in probably around the 1900s or so. Even it's gotten even much better since then. So those things have all been, or advances in all those things has caused the human population growth to kind of start increasing dramatically. And since these advances have occurred, the human population is currently in an period of exponential growth. So if you look, remember that curve going basically straight up. So the population of humans is increasing exponentially right now. And the reason why we know this and why we can see this is because there are actually people that study the growth, or that study human populations. And this scientific study is called demography. So this is going to be a word you're going to need to know. And demography will examine the characteristics of human populations and attempts to explain how those populations will change over time. So we know why these changes occurred. They were mentioned here due to demography. And then we were kind of use these changes to predict what's going to happen in the future. And then another thing, even kind of getting more specific with this, is that we can look at how population growth rates differ in countries throughout the world. So people are kind of curious as to why different countries experience different growth rates and things like that. So that's what these people are going to look at. So birth rates, death rates, and the age structure of a population help predict why some countries have high growth rates while other countries grow more slowly. So again, birth rates, death rates, and again, that's going to be pretty obvious to explain when population's growing. Obviously, if you have more people being born than you do die, then your population's going to grow. But however, to get a little more advanced, we actually can look at the amount of people we have at each age. So we're going to take a look at each one of those kind of more in depth. And so to help explain again why some populations in different countries are growing while others are shrinking, demographers, or people that study demography, have come up with what is called the demographic transition. And the example is that over the past century, the United States, Japan, and much of Europe, the population growth has slowed dramatically. So in those countries, the population growth has not been as high as it was. And according to demographers, these countries have completed what's known as a demographic transition, so that's going to be an important thing to know. And this is just a dramatic change in the birth and death rates. So how this is explained, and again why these countries have seemed to slow down, that the demographic transition has 3 stages. So in the first stage, there are high death rates and high birth rates, so they're pretty much equal, population not growing a lot. However, in stage 2, the death rate will drop while the birth rate remains high, and this will cause our population to increase rapidly. So there is a time when, again, improved sanitation happens. We all are having a lot more children while less people are dying, people are living longer, and so the population will increase rapidly. However, that's not always going to keep up. The birth rate will then decrease, which will cause the population growth to slow down. And the demographic transition will be complete when the birth rate falls to meet the death rate, and then population growth will stop altogether. So if you look, here is kind of a graphic representation of this of this demographic transition. Again, you can see birth rate and death rate are both very high in stage 1. Then in stage 2, the death rate drops while the birth rate stays very high. However, in stage 3, the final, they kind of come back down and they meet again, and the population growth will then stop. So that's how we examine it using birth rate and death rate. And then another way we can look at our populations is our age structure. So this is kind of an interesting kind of way to look at things. So population growth will depend in part on how many people of different ages make up a given population. So obviously, if your population contains more 25 to 30-year-olds, your population is going to grow much more quickly than if you have all 70-year-olds and all young children. So demographers can predict the future growth using models called age structure diagrams. And what these do is they show the population of a country broken down by their gender and by their age group. So an example, we can look here on the right. We have the United States. We have the age structure diagram. And in the United States, there are nearly equal members of people in each age group. So you can look from our very bottom for the 0 to 4 all the way up to about probably close to the 50s, getting up to the 60s. The numbers don't vary that much. They're pretty much the same amount of people are in each one of those groups. So, however, there are a little bit more towards the bottom than towards the top, so it's going to predict a slow but steady increase in our growth rate for the near future. So we're not going to go kind of crazy in the U.S., but we will have a steady growth rate, or a steady increase in our population. However, if you look at the country of Rwanda, there are many more young children than teenagers, and there's many more teenagers than adults. So if you look, the bottom part is just basically where the most is, and so this is going to indicate that the population will double in about 30 years, because what's going to happen is all those people that are down in the lower ages in about 30 years, they're all going to be having kids, so the number of people is just going to increase dramatically. So it'll just look like the bottom part all the way through the entire chart. So that's how you can look, again, very different here with their age structure diagrams. And this is just kind of predicting the future population growth of the world. Again, at its current growth rates, by the year 2050, we could have close to 9 billion people, or over 9 billion people living on the planet. And ecologists then will suggest that if this growth does not slow down, there could be serious damage to the environment and global economy. So our planet most likely is not ready to have 9 billion people living on it. It's just we cannot support it. And then economists assert that science, technology, and changes in society may control the negative impact of population growth. So we're going to have to figure something else out, or our world might kind of cease to exist, or people are going to start dying off. So that's kind of a scary thing to think about, but hopefully we can figure it out before then. So that's it for this chapter. Let me know if you have any questions.